Hi, welcome to Technical Writing Uncensored. I am back with Senior Director of Content and Knowledge Engineering at Avalara, Michael Iantosca. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Diane.
My pleasure. So, how did you get into technical writing?
Oh boy. I was a photographer originally. My undergraduate degree was communications, journalism, and television media. I had done a stint at ABC TV out of college, but joined IBM because I've been a photographer since I've been 12 years old in a very serious way. And when they shut down the operation, they asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said, "Well, I've got a degree in communications, journalism, and a master's I'm working on programming and computer science." And they said, "Well, we know just the right place for you, technical writing." And yeah, 45 years later, here I am, doing still in the same discipline and enjoying it as much, if not more, than ever.
All right, well, good. So, apparently, Avalara is an AI first company. What does it mean for
Mhm.
you to work there? At an
It
AI first
means
company, I mean.
That's a great question. It means that everybody in the company, I mean, every single person in the company has to be AI, not just AI literate. They need to be able to create AI solutions. For example, everybody in the company needed to be trained not only on the concepts of AI, but on tools such as agentic workflow creators, visual ones like N8N, for example, so that even the average office worker could automate strings of tasks by creating agents out of pre-canned agents that could be, you might want to summarize your email in the morning and connect it to your calendar and see how that affects your day, for example, or the next activities that you're due to fulfill. So even, from the most sophisticated level, which would be engineering, who's been developing AI for our tax compliance for many years, traditional AI. So this is not new for the company. But generative AI, when it came around, it was everything. We're going to look at everything. We're going to look at agentifying and using generative AI on all of our processes, all of our business operations, literally everything. And so the whole company is focused on optimizing, automating, and making better what we
Hmm.
do, not just eliminating work. And that has the effect of scaling up quality that that affects scaling up customer satisfaction. That has the effect of delivering more time to value for customers because we're delivering more product using agentive software development. That also means more documentation because we're scaling up documentation or product deliveries with new and updated products. So it has a top to bottom, bottom to top uh, cultural and technological impact across a business that decides to become an AI company.
Hmm. Has this affected headcount?
I can't talk directly to headcount numbers, but I would say the roles are shifting rather than eliminating like,
Hmm.
for example, I can speak pretty strongly to say the technical documentation space. What I'm seeing is we don't need people to be doing as much of the grunt work, maybe developing the first draft of documents, for example, or doing as much research because we're taking a lot more knowledge up front, shifting it left, and where their skills are needed are more in the architecture of the AI agentic solutions and systems that we're building, and the governance of those systems, and the uh, a whole litany of requirements that come up, like taxonomy management and ontology management. And I think I listed in one of my papers at least 15 to 20 new roles that crop up in the agentic AI space, in the
Hmm.
AI space. So it's the roles and responsibilities, the job definitions are literally changing as I speak. The if you have an engineering team like we have, which is rare, only a small percentage of companies have a documentation platform engineering team that's dedicated. There's not a day goes by when my document engineers are working directly with the professional documentation folks, information architects, editors, strategists, to design, to implement, to manage, to govern, to do the QA. So it's not we're eliminating as jobs as much as it's changing the roles of what those jobs are and where the focus needs to be at a higher level than, like I said, more of the run-of-the-mill grunt work that could be highly automated at certain points that just free up people. And that's important because, as I said, when you look at the software development process, because I work in software, that's being agentified. And we can define what agentic means versus regular AI too. And when that happens, the volume of product updates skyrockets, and the volume of new product goes up, which has the effect of we need more information. So we're in a situation where if there might be some companies hiring more writers these days. I see that happening. And you might see some companies scaling down, say, the technical writers, but moving those people into different roles. And the reason why that unevenness exists is because certain teams have the engineering resources to do the more advanced AI implementations right now, and other teams are more dependent on vendors that yet haven't provided those highly advanced AI models. So we have a very strange K-shaped evolution of content going on right now in the documentation automation space.
Yeah, you mentioned a difference between general AI and agentic AI. Could you expand on that, please?
Sure. We've had some great tools over the last couple of years that people have learned how to use. Just about everybody has learned how to use a large language model like ChatGPT or Gemini, or take your pick of all the different models that are out there. Folks have been been prompting, writing prompts. They've sometimes been training up custom GPT models to train them to be automated editors or style controls. Or other kinds of tasks. They have adopted, in some cases, some vendor tools that have integrated AI. I know of a couple of them, out there. You got Acrolinx has made theirs more AI. You have Oxygen, and for the people that use data, they've built Positron, which is really a very advanced, an amazing way to bring AI into the authoring environment. But they're siloed. In other words, that's just one piece of a very large end-to-end content production ecosystem and supply chain. And so what you've got going on in the traditional AI space, and I'm meaning generative AI at this point, is you've got individual tool usage that people with groups or teams without dedicated documentation platform engineering development teams have learned how to string together themselves manually. They use one tool here, use a tool during this piece of the step, and a different tool. With agentic AI, it's different. With agentic AI, you can develop agents think of them like people, right? They do certain tasks, and they can have skills and memory, and they can be special purpose. And then you can tie those together in an orchestrated way so that something happens first and something happens second. Maybe, I can explain a simple agentic doc process, which might be, there's a whole lot of great collateral out there, a lot of knowledge that we capture when we're developing products. We have code, obviously. We've got prototypes, like V0, for example. There's other tools out there that create prototypes. We've got Figma designs. We have demo videos and presentations. There's a whole litany of collateral about what's being updated or what's being built in the software space, for example. And we can have different agents having different skills collect all of those pieces, the PRFAQs, right, that are like the press releases built at the very beginning to even before anything's developed. And we can have those agents process those pieces of collateral to extract the essential information we want out of them and use them to actually generate a first draft. And now what matters is how complete, what's the quality of those pieces? How complete are they? How clear are they? But if we get a high quality set of input knowledge, generating that first draft could be sped up significantly, sometimes by up to 70 or 80%, where it used to take 2 weeks to develop a first draft of a feature, take 2 minutes. And then we actually can work on the last remaining 10, 20, 30% to make it really good and focus the human effort on that part rather than what we typically have done for over years, which is, 80, you only spend 15% of our time actually writing first drafts. The rest of our time is investigative journalism and going out and trying to find out what the heck did these, our developers build and why did they build it? And so, it's different from the olden days. I feel like I should break into Gregorian chant like in my day. But when I started, we had 500-page specifications to start from, and then we would go interview the developers, and we became sort of filling in the blanks. To when Agile came out, that went away. We were no longer getting specifications. It was Agile, and we became true investigative journalists at that point. And there was a real disconnect because, the information developers or tech writers would have to go off and learn how to use the product as a user, backward engineer almost what was designed, interview people, do everything by hook and crook to answer the 50 to 100 questions that we would typically ask just to develop a task topic. We're sort of returning to that in a way. Software development has moved from using individual AI tools like, Cursor or Q, to having a swarm of agents, an agent to triage thousands of Jira tickets and find the ones that are easy to, update. It would actually write the code, offer to check the code in to the repository and summarize what it did. And so, if you think about it, what's the input to a truly agentic software development process? Well, it's documents, it's specification. It's almost like we're going back to a waterfall process that we grew up with. Those of us,
except much faster.
Except much faster, and the quality, again, it's garbage in, garbage out. But if it's high quality input, you get some pretty darn good high quality output, and then we can make the engineers even more responsible for conveying the knowledge that needs to be conveyed to inform the rest of the downstream process, to really focus on quality, usability, completeness, clarity, optimization of editorial, and an optimization of usability. That's a mouthful, but that's the difference between just individual AI tools and then putting together agents that can do different parts of the task. Now, there's two different modes of agents. One is the process runs with no human involved. And that can be very effective for straightforward operations, like maybe refactoring the entire content corpus. We did that, where we decided to flatten all of the levels of documentation down to just 3 levels of headings, right? And fixed the problem of customers getting lost in even deeper levels of navigation, right? That happens over time. That doesn't require a human necessarily, but there is cleanup to do sometimes at the end of that, because not everything goes smooth. But that's okay. 5% of a cleanup is not a big deal when you're dealing with 10,000 documents. But then there's what we call orchestrated agentive workflows. for documentation. This is where we sequence the process, different agents at different stages of that workflow. And we might make them even what we call stateful workflows, where after one phase, maybe the initial generation phase, we generate the documents and we optimize them with maybe a linter using an API. But then we have a human review it in an editable way to say, wait, is this complete and accurate? And we give them an opportunity to edit that last 10 or 20% that if that's what they need to do before approving it, and then approving it or going through whatever approval process is there, and then automating the rest of the publishing pipeline all the way to staging and eventually approving it to publication. That's an immense amount of time saved.
Yeah, so you and I actually started chatting when you reached out to me and said, hey, you haven't really talked about an end-to-end workflow, and you kind of alluded to it, but is this what you're talking about with an end-to-end AI workflow with minimal human involvement?
That's right. We're talking about designing a degree of automation that is highly reliable and returns measurable speed and quality through agentifying things. And again, I know that there will be traditional documentation people this is their worst nightmare, right? It's AI is replacing my job as a technical writer, but not really, because we have many skills in technical writing: information architect, editors, content strategist. It really raises the role to a much higher level. If I were to give it a name, I would call it knowledge experience engineer. Because now we're focused on engineering content generation and publishing that requires a lot of knowledge that we didn't have before. For example, managing taxonomies to properly classify our content so that machines could do much of that automation and distribution. Ontologies that have been typically the skills of knowledge management, library sciences graduates, because those are necessary if we want to get into things like knowledge graphs to provide far more accurate answers and retrieval of content and search. And so these are all new skills that are percolating up as we take the onus off of the traditional technical writer on the grunt work. And they can focus on the accuracy and the quality of what we're building. So yeah, we're stringing together a gen of AI, and what matters is whether the Achilles heel has been all this probabilistic activity that's large language models give us today. It can make mistakes. It can tell you something confidently very wrong. But that's where the job becomes interesting, because we have ways to reduce or eliminate that probabilistic capable behavior and make it what we call deterministic, absolute, where we're doing real reasoning, real deductive reasoning in those agents, or we're doing real inferencing, what humans do, but we architect it and manage it and govern it. So that we're no longer just saying, here's some slop, give it to AI, give it to a large language model and let it generate something that's 50% wrong. That's not going to work. You have to have governance models, automated governance models and mechanisms, like I said, through structured content. It's never been more important than ever that our content be self-identifying to machines. So it's no longer good. It's no longer good enough to say, here's a document and I'm going to tell you how it's formatted. This is going to be a heading, and this is going to be 5-point, Helvetica, and this is going to be whatever. We need to know what's the information about. And so identifying what the information is about, more than feeding a document and how it's formatted, is far more valuable. Componentizing that content. Saying this is a procedure. This is a procedure about installing product X. This is a danger. This is a caution statement. This is an API, and the API is about, X. So labeling all that content properly, whether it be through XML, whether it be through DITA, whether it be through taxonomy, is what the machine needs to do this intelligent document processing. And no longer is it using Word or Markdown, just saying this is to be formatted, to look this way. A machine doesn't care how the content looks. It wants to know what it is
Yeah,
and
that
to be
makes
able to
sense.
figure out why, right? So where people thought things like XML and DITA were, long in the tooth and dead, it just turns out that that's what the machine needs. And now we're feeding
Hmm.
machines. We're not feeding people anymore at the development side, but people are still on the receiving side. So I always say, write for people, designed for machines.
Yeah.
That's how to break it down.
Yeah, speaking of people, I mean, we kind of have alluded to this a little bit, but how do you make sure that the content is correct and complete with minimal human involvement? I mean, engineers are notorious for, say, skipping steps. And if the engineers are in charge of doing that, or if there's a missing or confusing step, or if the agent hallucinated something, how do you catch that? How do you detect it?
That's a brilliant question, and that is what we're in the heart of developing and honing. And how you do that is critical. The first step is, so this is why I said that the professional information developers, the professional technical writers, their role changes significantly because their job becomes much more of a governance job, that QA job that we talked about. Um, so they become a critical human in the loop process. Even if they're not doing it manually as a human in the loop, they're designing the automation and governing the automation that we're building into the agents. Let me give you an example just to make it concrete, right? So let's say we've got an input corpus, video coming in, a video demo, or we have other documentation coming in as an input to the agentic process. Well, what we want to be able to do is assess that information against a list of criteria to say, are we getting good information in? Let's think about a task topic. Okay, what does a professional, highly trained, diligent content professional do when you're going to write, say, a task topic? Forget the format; that doesn't matter at this point. But you're going to look at all the required inputs. You're going to look at the user role. You're going to look at experience level. You're going to think about the user in terms of of user goals and intents and objectives. You're going to research and say, does the input have that information? Does it have the steps? Does it have the prerequisites and the examples and expected outputs clearly defined? How about the terminology? I'm sorry. How about the user goals and the intent? Why they need it? What's the success criteria? I can go through 50 or 100 different questions that we've documented over the years in books like Developing Quality Technical Documentation and other papers and documents that have trained many professional information developers that have grown up doing that, just wrote in their heads. We've got to train the agents to look at the input collateral and say, does it have those things? Does it describe the feature behavior? Does it describe the outcome that we're expecting, the preconditions, the postconditions? And so AI could be used very effectively to look at that input collateral and measure it against those criteria and then score it at a confidence level and say, yeah, we do have good input, right? Then the
Yeah.
question comes is the output that was generated, does that match or align with what the input provided, right? So we can even look at confidence levels and scores on that level. So that's another level of upfront verification. The next thing we can do is we can look at the quality of the content, the editorial quality. There's great tools out there. We've used them for years. Congri, Acrolinks, HyperSTE. These are tools that can measure the quality of the language. We can look at the consistency of the terminology. We can look at the style conformance. We can look at the grammar. We can look at all these different aspects of clarity and stuff and measure it. And with some of these tools, we can even add them to the agents and have the agents do the first pass of optimization for editorial and style conformance, for example, even before a human gets to it to fine tune it. So we were actually able to take our entire corpus of content and optimize the entire corpus to bring it up from like scores of 75, 80, all the way up into the 90s. Just with certain tweaks to the content, using an agent to do that. And then when we looked at it as a human afterwards, it did it correctly. It did it accurately.
Nice.
Which was real nice. So that's the front end verification. So now you've got the content generated and you've got an SME looking at what was generated. They can edit it. They can further run some tooling on it, more linters or more optimizations. But at the end of the day, we hit the button and say, yes, it's approved for publication. How do we know it's accurate and complete? Well, the next thing that you'll see teams working on that are doing agentic development, AI development, is automating what Manny Silva has been advocating for years, which is documents as tests. And in the past, it's been a phenomenal process, highly, sometimes manual, sometimes a little human assisted automated, but we could agentify that. We can take the generated documentation and then we can use it to actually run the application and see, does the application actually do what this document says how to do? And is it successful? There's multiple approaches to doing that, but I think automating and agentifying what we call docs as tests is a very big area and fertile area for development.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm delighted to see Manny's work getting attention and wondering where it'll go next. What advice do you have for teams that want to try taking steps towards building their own end-to-end agentic documentation workflow?
Yeah, that's another critical question. The first thing that we need to do is we need to analyze what we do as professional documentation people, right? Much of what we do is in our heads, not written down. I've never seen a process document that really gets into the depth. We always talk about the big rocks, right? When we talk about an end-to-end content supply chain, right? We know we have to collect, this knowledge. We know we need to, edit it. We know we need to edit it. We need to, do the QC, QA controls on it. But like I was listing earlier, just in developing a simple task topic, many of those things are in people's heads, not written down. And when you're developing an agentive process, the most important thing to do is to do a true and very deep, detailed process analysis. What do we as humans do? That's not even documented. What decisions do we make when we're collecting that information? So it really is an analyst kind of step that if you skip it, that will be your Achilles heel, because you need to have agents pick up those skills. And you can't have an agent pick up those skills unless you've detailed, analyzed your true process. And your process may be different. It's different from shop to shop. So there's no universal process that is going to be right for every single shop. And it differs. It differs for shops that are developing API doc. It differs from people who are developing partner doc or marketing content or technical documentation. So that process analysis cannot be skipped and cannot be taken lightly. It needs to be very detailed. Even if your initial agents don't have all those skills, that should be your North Star ultimately to get to over a period of time. So that's first thing. Second thing is we have a resource problem. We've never had enough writers. We know that. That's been the bane of our existence since day one. But it's very rare to have dedicated engineers managing your documentation platform. whether you're using Git and Markdown and a series of tools. Many of these shops have doc shops is a DIY, do it yourself kind of assembly of our documentation tools and systems. I'd venture to guess that the number of shops that have dedicated engineers managing their document platforms is probably still in the single digits. And I'm not surprised. And that sort of is consistent with what I find at the conferences when I talk to teams and I talk to people. What's going to happen, I think, I'm guessing at this point, or I'm projecting, is you may see the need for more technical writers as the software development lifecycle gets faster with all of this agentive software development, meaning more documentation. And then these teams don't have these agentic processes to cope with that onslaught of more documentation. And I think it's eventually going to get to a breaking point where either the teams are going to go out and find good consultants to hire to build these processes, or going to get some dedicated engineers to build them. And once they're built, they're going to need to be maintained. So that's not going to be a temporary situation. Or some teams are just going to wait it out until the platform vendors that provide them tools to provide some of that agentic capability. But none of them will have the end-to-end environment because they each typically only handle one part of the supply chain. Or you're going to get some enterprising developers within the company. They're going to come along and they're going to see documentation as a piece of low-hanging fruit, and they're going to develop it. And there lies the biggest danger of all, because when that happens, they may not even start consulting the professional documentation.
Oh, God.
Start doing it. And what I try to share with shops is get on the front end of that. Be the people who are directing whatever one of those paths are that I just listed, and be leading it. Don't be a victim of it. Because I think that happens. I think developers often see opportunity to automate something. They don't understand the complexities of developing technical documentation and what people have learned over many, many, many years. But they're very good in developing code and trying to oversimplify things. And all of a sudden, they're asking the doc team, "Hey, we can automate your stuff without any input." I mean, they've already pilfered our content, right, to build chatbots without, and in many cases, didn't even ask the documentation team. That should have been a lesson learned right there over the last 3 years.
Oh, right? When I was at Write the Docs last, we heard from someone who the product has a chatbot that does not see the documentation. She's like trying to change that, but you need to have some input from people who know what these things should be trained on, and that's really content specialists like us. What advice do you have for people dealing with this dismal job market? What skills or what should we be looking? Should they develop? What should we be looking for?
I think the first thing is to understand the technology a little better. They don't have to become developers, but they do need to understand what is the difference between traditional AI tools and agentic workflows. That's really pretty important detail that they should understand. They should start learning more about the knowledge management side of the business. They should really understand taxonomies and ontologies and knowledge graphs and start reading about it. I subscribe to medium.com, and it's a wonderful resource because you can put in a subject matter and you'll just get a daily feed of great articles, or you can search on the basics of what these things are. So there, like I said, there's a whole litany of new skills to look at. Let me see if I can give you just a brief summary of what some of those skills are. So, for example, we're going to need knowledge architects that design and govern the semantic model that defines what the organization knows. We're going to need people who are developing these platforms, the engineers that are building these agentic processes. We're going to need a designer that designs the workflows that the agents actually do. We're going to need people focusing on trust and what we call provenance, the ability to be able to prove the legacy of decisions that are made by these agents. We're going to need an AI enablement leader. That's not an engineer. That's a documentation professional, a retrieval architect. People focusing on agentic search. There's just so much here that I do detail in some of my papers on my website. I publish everything on thinkingdocumentation.com. And I break out a lot of these job roles in my latest papers that are emerging, that we're seeing emerging as a result of building these new workflows. So, as I said, it's more important that the current technical doc professionals stop thinking about my job is to develop drafts. My job is to actually build, manage, deploy, and operate and govern these new systems. And there's quite a few roles involved in doing that.
Thank you so much, Michael. By the way, the link to that website will be in the description. And thank you for joining me today. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I hope that everyone else found it as informative as I did. So, hey, please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon if you got value from this conversation, and maybe leave a comment about where your company is in agentic AI development and what your goals are. Are you moving towards it? Are you happy with single tools? Let's start a conversation. And I'll see you next time on Technical Writing Uncensored. Bye now.
Okay.